You're sitting across the kitchen table from a seller. You've prepared a flawless comparative market analysis. The data is airtight. The math proves exactly where the house needs to be priced. You slide the paperwork across the table, expecting a nod of agreement. Instead, they cross their arms, barely glance at the numbers, and say those familiar words, "I know what my house is worth." Why does this happen? Why do perfectly logical facts completely fail to change a client's mind? You are witnessing a highly predictable cognitive glitch that affects everyone. Psychologists call this the Dunning-Kruger effect. This phenomenon explains why the person in the room with the least amount of information often maintains the highest confidence in their own abilities. This chart maps how we learn. On the vertical axis, we have confidence. On the horizontal axis, actual competence or knowledge. When someone first encounters a complex subject, like selling a house, their confidence spikes almost immediately. Researchers call this peak Mount Stupid. This is the exact cognitive location of a seller who has sky-high confidence because they lack the specific market awareness to realize how complex the transaction actually is. As actual knowledge increases, that false certainty plummets into the valley of despair. Most professional agents hit this valley in their first year. A client at this stage lacks the metacognition, the ability to think about their own thinking, required to perceive the vast complexity of the real estate market. To see how this psychology triggers a stalemate, consider the battleground of buyer-agent compensation. You explain the logic. Structuring the buyer's agent fee into the purchase price protects the seller's net proceeds by expanding the buyer pool and keeping the deal moving. But the seller shuts down. They reject the math, fixating on a single belief. I am not paying for someone else's agent. It's my money. In the 19th century, philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer identified a pattern in human nature that explains why these mathematical arguments fail. He called it heuristic dialectic. Schopenhauer observed that people generally do not argue to discover the truth. They argue to defend their pre-existing internal frame or worldview. When a client's core belief is threatened by new data, the human brain is hardwired to protect the frame by rejecting the math. Brute logic is an ineffective tool against a client's established psychological frame. You must execute a strategic pivot. Stop explaining why you are right and start asking targeted questions. Instead of pushing your spreadsheet, you ask a reframing question. What if the buyer actually financed their own agent's fee through the final purchase price, rather than you writing a check out of pocket? The mathematical outcome of the transaction is identical, but the psychological ownership of the solution has shifted. They are no longer losing their money, they are letting the buyer pay. Professional success in negotiation comes from guiding a client toward a new frame that feels like their own personal discovery. To apply this during your next client meeting, use 3 rules of engagement. First, don't take resistance personally. Repeating facts with aggression won't cure a frame problem. It only entrenches the client further. Second, be useful, not right. The ultimate goal in the living room is a successful transaction, not a victory in a debate. And third, shift from convincing to guiding. Dynamic conning requires the calm control needed to lead someone through a hazardous environment they do not understand. True mastery in real estate requires a command of both the market data and the cognitive architecture of the people you serve. A frustrating FSBO seller or a stubborn buyer is simply a person stranded on the peak of the Dunning-Kruger curve. Most agents stood on that exact same peak of unearned confidence before the market humbled them. Your professional purpose is to help the client down from that dangerous altitude safely. The expert's role is to use their knowledge and make the path down the mountain look worth taking.